Today's episode, we're going to have a fun little look back at the 2020 NHL Draft and do a redraft of the top 15 with hindsight in our favor.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. My name is Sebastian High, and I'm the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects, typically joined by Hattie Kalikesh, the QMJHL scout at Elite Prospects, who's out for the week with sickness, unfortunately. And on today's show, we have a really interesting topic here, as we are going to do a redraft of the top 15 of the 2020 NHL Draft. And that is meaning looking back at who the new top 15 is, not just reordering the 15 players that were selected first in that draft class. So there's definitely a lot of room for debate, a lot of room for disagreement here, and also a lot that still needs to be seen. There are certain players that we're going to talk about that have yet to even play an NHL game so far in their careers, but it's going to be very fun to kind of look back at the draft, see what's changed, the big risers, the big fallers, and kind of how everything comes into play and which NHL teams were actually the biggest winners of that 2020 draft. But before we jump into the show, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So this is going to be a really fun episode, and I actually put the question out on Twitter as well to see what you, the audience, and just people that are out on Twitter had to think about the same question in terms of the redraft. And I was comforted to realize that it's very much the same players that are in the mix. And I think there are also some very distinct tiers that kind of form here. Whether it be the tier between 1 and 4, that seems to be kind of consensus. Same can be said about the tier from like 5 to 7, 5 to 9 as well. And then there's kind of a bunch of bodies in that 10 to 20 range. And we're going to look at the top 15. I've got 3 honorable mentions on top of that. So we can look at it as almost a top 18 as well in this episode. And we'll start off with the top 2 because the Ottawa Senators are the massive winners of the 2020 draft. They had 2 selections that were high-end lottery picks and got rather unlucky in neither of them hitting the jackpot. Neither of them hit first overall or even second overall. They end up picking 3rd and 5th overall, selecting Tim Stützle at number 3 and Jake Sanderson at number 5. And those are the 2 players in that order coming in at number 1, number 2 in this re-ranking of that draft class. Tim Stützle is the player with the most consistent offensive upside out of his entire draft class so far at the NHL level. He's dynamic. He's so skilled, highly creative with the puck on his stick. A very strategic player as well, you could argue, in terms of drawing penalties and very much integrating the German football ethos a little bit in there as well, in terms of strategy of getting the small advantages through slight theater at times, but the level of skill that Stützle has is fantastic, and I've really loved his development since his draft year. He was a player I personally had ranked 5th overall, which had some doubts about just how well the dynamism would translate to the NHL, and those were pretty much erased after year 1 and definitely gone by year 2. This is a player that's just been fantastic. He can play down the middle. He can play on the wing. He's so versatile. Can make a difference just about everywhere in the offensive zone. A dynamic transition attacker as well. And I've seen his defensive game take some pretty big strides as well since his draft year. So he's the player I have at number 1. And really the only contender with him at number 1 was his teammate, Jake Sanderson, a player that I know is beloved by Senators fans, and for great reason. I think that he's still a bit underrated among the NHL fan base as a whole. He's easily a number one defenseman already in the NHL at this point. I think he's easily a top 20 defenseman in the entire league at this stage. He is dominant at both ends of the ice, a fantastic skater, a great puck mover. He's creative with the puck on his stick. Not the biggest activator in the world in the offensive zone. He's not like your Lane Hudson or anything, or your Cale Makar in terms of offensive involvement, but he's a fantastic puck carrier, really good sense of timing and deception on puck as well. But it's in the defensive zone where he really makes his mark and sets himself apart from the other defensemen in this 2020 draft class as well. He is so proactive. He is really, really intelligent. He always takes calculated risks, and the calculation behind them is always really refined. A really smart player who's able to leverage his range and his mobility really effectively. He's suffocating against the rush, and a player that I definitely think should be valued a bit higher league wide than he is at this stage. And I couldn't name you a player in this draft class other than Tim Stützle that I would rather have on my team if I were building one up from scratch. He's a player that I think you can really build a franchise around. So they got two fantastic foundational pieces here, and the Senators really came out big with two high-end selections overperforming on the draft slots, which is just fantastic value for Ottawa. Next at number 3, we have Alexis Lafrenière, who went first overall, of course. There was definitely a debate between him and Byfield for that first overall slot leading up to the draft. Even Tim Stützle was kind of making the debate for like a 3-horse race by the last month of the year, but obviously that didn't turn out. I know there were a lot of rumors about the Los Angeles Kings wanting to actually go him over Byfield before they obviously eventually went with Byfield. But Lafreniere's development's been really solid over the last year and a half, especially. It was a bit of a slow adjustment to the NHL, and that makes sense with hindsight as well. This is a player that made his mark in the queue by being very physically mature at a very young age. He was always solidly built, strong frame, 6'2", but never a really super plus level skater. Some really good tools, some really high IQ, but just the physical maturity combined with that high level intelligence allowed him to dominate the junior ranks, and didn't prove as separating factors at the NHL level because the opposition could think the game as well as he could, and they were as physically refined as he was. So there wasn't really those advantages that he was used to at the NHL level when he made the jump. But with a couple of years of development and some really valuable ice time with players Chris Kreider, I think, has been a great winger to play with. Artemi Panarin's been great to play with. Of course, there's been the kid line where he's played a lot with Philip Hedl and Capo Caco. A lot of skilled, intelligent players that he's gotten used to playing alongside. Nick Zibanejad, of course, too. And just a lot of skill in that New York Rangers top 9. And he's definitely been working his way up that top 9, and he's been a key top line player for them this season. He's just under a point a game, I believe. Last I checked, it was 10 points in 11 games for Lafrenière, and he's developed really, really nicely. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he continues to take steps with the New York Rangers. But he looks like a first line player long term to me right now. Doesn't have the same level of dynamism as a Tim Stützle does, which I think is still a bit of a separating factor between those two, but he still remains the top forward beyond Stützle, in my opinion, with hindsight now, 4 years after the draft. At number 4, kind of completing this top tier in my eyes, is Quinton Byfield, a player that took massive strides in his development last season with the Los Angeles Kings. Just this hulking, fantastically mobile and deft and skilled centerman who has so much to offer, and also so much runway still in his development. Even now, 4 years after the draft at 22, he was far from a finished product. Last season, he took massive strides with really taking the reins of the offense at times with Los Angeles. And this year, it's been a bit of a slower start. I think that's kind of going to be the story of the first 5 to 6 years of Byfield's NHL career, of hills and valleys, kind of things coming very easily at times and more difficultly in other moments. But I still see real first line center upside with this player. Maybe he ends up on the wing instead, but I definitely see the top line potential here still. The tools are fantastic. The hockey mind in the offensive zone is really high end as well. There's still a bit of wonkiness of everything coming together and a bit of a lack of cohesion with his overall toolkit. But I really do think it will come together, and that's why he remains at number 4, ahead of last year's player who probably should have won the Calder Award in terms of actual impact on his team. Brock Faber, fantastic player, right shot defenseman for the Minnesota Wild, who was a massive, massive part of the Wild as an NHL rookie last season. He was never a big producer in the college ranks, but as soon as he came to the NHL, he became Minnesota's de facto number 1 defenseman, playing 24, 25 minutes a night as a rookie. Got a massive $8 million a year, 8-year extension in the off season, which I think was much deserved, and will probably also age quite well with how Faber plays. He's a fantastic off-puck player, an elite mover, really great skater. Great in the defensive zone, really good stick body layering in his defensive habits. Doesn't take unnecessary risks, but he keeps his gaps quite tight. Overall, his habits, his instincts are so refined, are very much NHL veteran caliber. And he also explored his offensive game a lot more in his rookie season with the Wild, playing on the power play. Had north of 40 points in his rookie season, and was just a really, really important piece. So in terms of overall impact, he's already outshone players like Quinton Byfield and what he's been able to do. I just see a bit more runway in his development with Byfield compared to a player like Brock Faber, but you also get the added boost that Faber is a right shot defenseman, which are worth gold in today's NHL. But that wraps up the top 5. And the next one, we're going to look at the 6 to 10 range, including players like Seth Jarvis and Lucas Raymond, as well as a player yet to play a single NHL game. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets the day of your game. Whether you want to go watch an NHL game, or maybe you're partial to football, maybe you even like soccer the most. Whatever your sport of choice may be, or even if your interests range as broadly as concerts and theater and comedy shows, whatever kind of thing you are interested in, Game Time is the place to be. I know I love looking on Game Time when I have a spontaneous afternoon off. My schedule's a bit flexible, those things happen. To see what's going on in my area, what kind of events are on sale, and the prices are always fantastic. With the Game Time guarantee, your price is guaranteed to be the cheapest that you can possibly find online, and if not, they're going to give you a 110% credit. One of my favorite parts about Game Time is that you can allow Game Time to choose the seats as long as you pick the section for you to save an extra 10% off your ticket. And right now, Game Time is having an exclusive zone deal for the NHL Winter Classic event at Wrigley Field. So go to the Game Time app to purchase tickets and get 10% off bleacher seating and 20 to 25% off on home plate area seats. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need all in one place to place live bets on the NFL. So when you have a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Whether you want to take your swings on American football or European football, with the Champions League now going on in full force and all the individual leagues having taken on action, or maybe you prefer tennis or golf, or if you're listening to this podcast, perhaps hockey is your sport of choice. Whatever kind of sports fan you are, FanDuel has something for you. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's keep this episode rolling here with wrapping up the top 10. And at number 6, I have a player that I am a massive fan of in Seth Jarvis, a guy that actually could have cracked a top 5 in here as well, of the Carolina Hurricanes, a player I had ranked 13th overall in this draft year. I loved his production with Portland in the WHL, one of the top producers in this class among CHL talent. And he's been fantastic in the NHL. He is a very skilled player on puck, a great shooter, a really deft playmaker as well, high-end puck handling abilities. But it is his unrelenting pace and intensity and board battling ability that make him so special and integral to the Carolina Hurricanes as they figure today, and why he's become indispensable on that top line in Carolina. This is a player that makes his mark in so many different ways. He's able to create advantages in all three zones of the ice, and is never missing a beat when it comes to intensity or engagement. He's constantly keeping his feet moving. He's always in really great places on the ice as well. He's a highly intelligent player, which I think often goes overlooked when the skill, the pace, and the intensity are so much at the forefront when you watch him play. But he's a player that I would certainly be drafting in the top 6 in a redraft of this draft class. At number 7 is Lucas Raymond. This is probably the lower end of his range, so don't get too mad at me, Detroit Red Wings fans. But I'm a very big fan of this player. He's highly dynamic, so great with the puck on his stick. The combination of playmaking and goal scoring handling skill is a really, really cohesive one. This is also a player with some of the best skating mechanics in the entire NHL, and who's just been a great fit on that top line in Detroit for a very long time. His combination with Dylan Larkin has just been so fluid for the last 3 seasons. So he's a player that I'm a very big fan of. I really appreciate how he plays the game. I just think that a guy like Seth Jarvis brings a little bit more in terms of well-roundedness to the equation than Lucas Raymond does, but the upside is still really enticing with Raymond. He could still very much become a point-a-game player for a good chunk of his career with the Red Wings. At number 8, we have a very interesting name, a player that, as I've been teasing this entire show so far, has yet to play a game in the NHL, and that is Alexander Nikishin, drafted by the Carolina Hurricanes at 69th overall in the 3rd round in 2020. Nikishin has become the best player outside the NHL the last 2 seasons now. He's the captain of SKA St. Petersburg, despite being just 22 years of age. And he is their big minute muncher. He plays the most minutes. He is on the first pairing, first penalty kill, first power play. A really, really important player who SKA St. Petersburg is going to do everything they possibly can to keep in their organization. I've already seen multiple photo shoots of him with Vladimir Putin, for instance, who is, of course, close to that organization as well. But this is a player that, as a left shot defenseman, a really big, mobile left shot defenseman, can do just about everything. He's a great distributor of the puck. He's physical. He's proactive when defending the rush. He's a fantastic cycle defender as well. He has a really good eye for keeping up with secondary and tertiary threats as well. Good scanning habits. He's refined. He's physically mature. He's intelligent on both sides of the puck. He's not going to really waste possession all that much, so don't look to him to go for like necessarily Hail Mary plays all the time. But he goes for some maybe not riskier, but like higher upside plays as well in transition. He searches for those stretch passes to really spread the defense and push them back and look for those counter attacking opportunities. But overall, he's a player that is going to be valuable wherever you are on the ice. In all 3 zones, he's a valuable piece. Has a wicked shot in the offensive zone. He can definitely be scoring 15 plus goals at the NHL level with good minutes. And I think he's going to be a stalwart in Carolina's top 4 long term, and quite possibly on a top pairing as well. This is one of the, as I said, I think he is individually probably the best player outside the NHL today. A really, really good player that shouldn't be taking too long to make the NHL. We'll see how the contract situation continues to evolve, obviously, but when he comes over, if he comes over, he's going to be a very valuable piece. At number 9, we have Marco Rossi, who was drafted 9th overall. So it's quite fitting that he falls right here as well in a redraft. It's a fantastic comeback story that he does. I mean, this is a player who had life-threatening long COVID. Following his draft year, missed so much time on the ice, but has just clawed his way back through hard effort ever since then. and has become indispensable to the Minnesota Wild in the past 2 seasons. I mean, like last year, we saw him really playing significantly in the top six. That has been the case again this season. He's just under a point a game as well to start the year, I believe, 10 points in 11 games for him. And yeah, he's been a really valuable piece in Minnesota and a player that's always been in my heart. I've loved watching him play, going back to his D-1 campaign with the Ottawa 67s, and a player I had ranked third overall in his draft year. I've always been a massive fan of his combination of skill, intelligence, and unrelenting motor and pace. He's always been a player that executes plays in a professional manner. Never took the liberties of junior hockey in the extra time and space. He just played his game, and he played at his maximum pace, maximum intensity all the time. Very refined player who I think is going to be very valuable for Minnesota for a very long time still, if they don't move on from him. I know there are some rumors in the offseason of him moving, and I think that they would be rather unwise to give in to those. And to wrap up the segment here, we have at number 10, Yaroslav Askarov, who was, of course, traded from the Nashville Predators to the San Jose Sharks in the offseason. And picked up an injury as well in preseason. So he's been starting the year with the San Jose Barracuda, but last I checked, he was riding a .950 save percentage through 4 or 5 games in the AHL. And if he can continue that, I think he'll be in the NHL in no time. And if you see Askarov getting really big minutes with San Jose in the NHL later on this season, I think that you're going to see his development really, really accelerate too. This is a highly athletic, really flamboyant and exciting goaltender. Plays very aggressively. There's definitely still some immaturity in his habits, but those also kind of go to his dynamism as a goaltender. He's not one of your boring, conservative, play it safe netminders that kind of just hedge the odds more often than not. Askarov takes his openings gleefully, and sometimes it comes back to bite him, certainly. But more often than not, that proactivity, I think, is going to serve him quite well in his development. And I think he's kind of still at the same point where he was in his draft year relative to his peers. He's kept up with his development trajectory. Goaltenders always take a bit longer, of course. He hasn't even played more than 3 NHL games at this point in his career, but very interesting prospect still, and one of the premier goaltending prospects league-wide at the moment. But that wraps up this second segment. In the final one, we're going to wrap up the top 15. We're going to talk about the 3 honorable mentions as well. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality of matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more that you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility instantly at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's wrap up the show here with finalizing our redraft of the top 15 of the 2020 NHL Draft. At number 11, I have a player that has made such a seamless transition to the NHL. And even though he's not on the highlight reel every single night, his value is always very clear, especially on the past 2 Stanley Cup final runs of the Florida Panthers. And that's Anton Lundell, a two-way centerman really good skater, fantastic defensive habits, really refined, great off-puck guy, really elevates his line mates and his wingers, especially in the offensive zone. He facilitates play for them really wonderfully. And even though he's not necessarily the most dynamic with the puck on his stick, he does have a couple end-to-end rushes in his locker. I've seen a couple lovely goals that he scored at the NHL level, but he's a solid playmaker, a decent goal scorer, especially from a bumper area. But it's not the offensive tools that make him special. It is the maturity. It is the habits on both sides of the puck. It is the facilitating of play for the players around him. He's truly a player that you want to plug into your middle six to just make life easier for the rest of your team, who you know is going to do their job, do their assignment, and do it really, really, really well. So he's a player that figures in here at number 11. At number 12, a little bit higher than where he was drafted on draft day, is Kaiden Guhle of the Montreal Canadiens, a player whose analytics still don't look amazing because he is being put in a very difficult position with not always the highest quality of teammates and always against very high quality competition, because he's a very refined defensive player. His defensive habits are so polished, whether it be the stick and body layering, whether it's the gap control against the rush, whether it is the shepherding of play towards the boards. There's so much to love in Kaiden Guhle's defensive game, and I think that his extension at $5.5 million per for 6 years is going to be a really, really nice one for Montreal and is going to age like fine wine. This is a player that plays better than I think a $5.5 million contract long term would indicate, and he's a really important piece of this core for Montreal, especially if he ends up on a second pairing long term for the Habs. I think that he's a fantastic fit and really, really important cog of this rebuild for the Habs. At number 13, we have Cole Perfetti, a player I loved in this draft. He had him ranked, I believe, 5th overall, maybe 6th. And he went to the Winnipeg Jets, of course, a little bit later than that, of course. And he's been really, really good for them. He's been playing top 6 minutes this season. Again, just under a point a game. He's really taking that step offensively. He has the puck on the stick a lot more this season than he did, for instance, 2 years ago, which is lovely to see. He's a great playmaker, wicked shot, really good, polished offensive toolkit. I've liked the improvements to his off-puck motor, especially. His defensive engagements improved a bit too. There's still some ground to be done there, I think, in terms of progression in the next year or two, but he's taken some important steps, and I think he's going to be a valuable top 6 offensive contributor for a very long time for the Jets. At 14, this is the low end of his range, so don't fight me, Buffalo Sabres fans, but I have J.J. Peterka, player that was drafted 34th overall in the second round in that 2022, in that 2020 NHL draft. And he has been fantastic for Buffalo in their top 6 the last couple of seasons. He's been a reliable offensive producer, nearly hit the 30-goal mark last season. I believe he had 28 goals. This season, he's been like almost at the point-a-game pace as well for the Sabres, and he's a guy that just brings everything you could want from the wing to the ice in a second-line capacity. So much pace, so much speed, good playmaking, good transition ability. Really able to elevate centermen that prefer to maybe be the third player to enter the offensive zone, and is really able to also lead the charge on the rush. And a really versatile offensive player as well. He can play a variety of roles on the cycle and on the power play. And I've really liked what I've seen from his progression, and he's definitely leapfrogged his German compatriot in that draft class in Lucas Reichel. But at 15, we have Braden Schneider of the New York Rangers. They trade up to 19th overall to select him, and he's been turning out very nicely for them as a second pairing right shot defenseman in that Rangers system. He's very physical, very good skater, not the fanciest on-puck player in the world, but is able to do his job on puck and really just kill plays defensively. I've loved how he's been fitting into that system. Also, the similarities in roles that he plays compared to a guy like Keandre Miller, for instance. And I think that he's been very, very important for the Rangers in really taking the step as an elite NHL team these last couple of seasons, and definitely a player that deserves a mention here as the final guy in the top 15. But we still have 3 honorable mentions here, and they very much were contenders for the top 15 range. So Let's start off here with Dawson Mercer, a player that definitely would have been top 15 in a redraft if you asked me 2 years ago, but whose offensive development has stagnated a little bit. He's a great skater, a great playmaker. It has some really nice highs as well in terms of offensive flair and production with the New Jersey Devils in the NHL, and has stagnated a little bit in his offensive development in the past couple seasons. So he's coming in here as a top honorable mention at 16th. Then we have Connor Zary, who has very much been raising his draft stock in the last year or two with the Calgary Flames, playing some fantastic hockey in their top six. He could easily have also been ahead of Mercer in these honorable mentions. A player that has a really good shot. He's really refined his the skill elements in his game and the pace at which he's able to execute offensive plays. The puck is off his stick before you can blink at this point when he gets it in high danger areas. And he's been fantastic for Calgary, and I'm very happy to see that he's been able to surmount a lot of the concerns that were there in his draft year regarding injury specifically. Last but not least, we have Tyson Foerster, a player that had a fantastic rookie season last year with the Philadelphia Flyers as a goal-scoring threat and a defensive dynamo. Really good two-way player. He's able to play down the middle. He's a good one-time threat on the power play, good defensive chops. Still some areas of weakness beyond those areas of strength. Certainly, I think that he could be a lot more involved on the rush, and certainly be a bit more active as a playmaker and a distributor and a facilitator of play. And that's been kind of the reason why he's been healthy scratched once or twice so far this season. But still a player I'm very high on, that I like a lot. And I think that that Philadelphia did very well to select him in the first round of that 2020 NHL draft. But that wraps up the episode here today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Sports Today for a 24-hour news show covering everything going on in the sporting world today. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what you thought about this show, and let us know what you want us to talk about next. We always love to hear what you guys want to listen to as well with our discussions here about the prospect world. And my name is Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects, usually joined by Hattie Kalakash. And hopefully he'll be back for next week's episodes. But until then, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope that you're back very shortly.